because more and more people, like the Somali clans, are coming here and establishing themselves here, and they are being told you can have, the welfare state, whatever it offers you, you can have it. You don't have to give anything in return. The Westerners are not having babies themselves. And then there's the Muslim Brotherhood. So there's that other layer, which I was telling you, that complex, which is explicitly telling Muslim immigrants, do not assimilate, do not adopt the values of the West.
I want to talk about your book, Infidel. You wrote this fantastic memoir, 15 years ago now, I think it came out. And I read it recently, and I just
2007.
2007, wow.
Yeah,
okay,
wow.
So almost 10
You
to
want
20.
to talk about Infidel.
I know, but I think it's relevant today. So obviously you came from Somalia, third world country, with a very different perspective on the West and how Westerners think and feel and breathe, and the whole culture is completely different. And we've imported millions of people from countries like Somalia. And I just wondered whether you can give us an insight into the mind of people who are born in these countries, who come from these cultures, and how different they are from Westerners.
Well, so in Infidel, I tried to tell that story autobiographically. I just tell you where I was born, and I also in Infidel include not just my own story, but my mother's and all the upheavals that she goes through, and then my grandmother's story. So even though it's a short period of time, I think my grandmother was born in 1919. No one knows when she was born, but my father estimates that she was born in 1919. So she's born in a nomadic context where her family are moving from waterhole to waterhole. She had never seen a white person before. She had no clue that modern life existed. And at one point, people from her world were leaving. Maybe a child of hers, a stepchild. Somehow they would hear stories about things that happened far away in places like Aden. Aden in Yemen at the time was considered to be very moral. It was a British colony. And so my mother, at the age of, I don't know, she said 15 or something like that, she goes to Aden following an older stepsister. And my mother works for an English woman as a housekeeper. She learns housekeeping. So my mother used to tell us stories of, the first time that she saw running water, the first time a toilet you can flush, the first time she saw soap. My mother may have been born in, I think, 1940. And when my mother was in Aden, along with an ever-growing Somali minority, there was this talk that the colonizer, you didn't talk, the colonizer or the white man was going to leave Somalia. The area wasn't called Somalia at the time. The area was divided into regions with different clans, but occupied by the British, the Italians, and then in Djibouti, which is part of, the Somalis consider it part of, they speak Somali in part of them, that was occupied by the French. So for the north, which was British Somaliland, and south, which was Italian Somaliland, when my mother was a teenager and in her early 20s, they used to have this big dream that they're going to become independent. And when independence comes and the white man is kicked out, life will be good. And so my mom is working as this housekeeper and she's saving her money. And she ends up going to Mogadishu because that's going to be the capital city. And at some point they establish a military, an army, and a government. And she buys a plot of land that was, I don't know if she said it was 10 acres or 100 acres. It was quite a lot of land for what she had saved from housekeeping money. And she plonks 2 rooms in it. And so that's where I am born. And my father and my mother meet because my father, who was also married to this idea of Somali nationalism, had started these literacy campaigns. Somalis had to learn to read and write, and very quickly. And he was part of the people pushing for that. So my mother had signed up for those classes to learn how to read and write. And then her stepsister put them together. My mother at that time was divorced, and she had one boy with her, a son. And so that, yeah, they got married, and my mother was married before. My father was married before my mother. He was, even though he's a modern man, he was married to a woman whom he had persuaded to go to the United States to go to university and work on her education. He just used to campaign for this whole education thing. And so while his first wife was in the US going to university, he married my mother. And that first wife had one daughter, my stepsister. And when she came back with her degree, my father was married and had 3 children and another one on the way. So that tells you the whole polygamy story, where even a very modern, at least my father's modern, still didn't quite give up some of these traditions. But then very soon, that whole dream of my father's is undercut by Mohammad Siad Barre, the Soviet Union. They come our way. They take this young man, a sergeant from the military, they install him as our president. They kill the sitting president and they send a bunch of people to prison. One of them was my father. So that's the story I try to tell in Infidel. There is no peaceful transition of power. And I grew up in this political context where everything is about, my father is in prison. So I didn't meet him in Somalia until we went to Saudi Arabia. And I was 6, 7 years old. When that happened. So the first time I meet my father, it is in Mecca, in Saudi Arabia, and he's just this divine hero. Everyone was talking about him, and he doesn't disappoint. And he starts that whole thing, my children are going to school, including my daughters, they're going to learn to read and write. And there's this conflict between him and my mother, where in some ways she's more traditional than he is. She just wants to settle in Saudi Arabia and raise her children in a Muslim context and grow old and die and peacefully meet her Lord, just the way she was told life should go on. And he has other plans. But he finds a job in Saudi Arabia, and the Saudi government, they make him promise, if you want to live in this country and hold on to your job, we don't want you involved in the politics of Somalia at all. You have to make that promise. So he makes that promise, keeps the job, but keeps sneaking out to Ethiopia all the time because a huge opposition against this Mohammad Siad Barre was building up there. And so from one day to the next, the Saudis discover what was happening and they make good on their promise and they say, you have to leave the country within 24 hours. And then I watch another fight between my father and my mother because my mother wanted to go to another Muslim country. She didn't want to go to Ethiopia. But we end up going to Ethiopia because no other country would have us. We had spent 4 days and nights at the airport in Khartoum in Sudan, but they wouldn't let us in. I think what was happening at the time was Mohammad Siad Barre was probably giving calls to all of these countries saying, no way, or send them over. But we were registered with the UNHCR, so we couldn't be surrendered back to Siad Barre. So I grew up in this topsy-turvy world of complete upheaval. First grade I did in Somalia, second grade I did in Saudi Arabia, third grade I did in Ethiopia, fourth grade and beyond I did in Kenya. So it was just wild.
You had a very unique experience, I have to say, as of any human being, actually. You saw so many countries and so many different cultures. But there were themes, I think, that are relevant to today in terms of the migrants who have come to Britain and to Western Europe and to a lesser extent America. You talk about the clannish culture in Somalia. You talk about the sort of digins, the magic that people believed in. And when you come to the Netherlands, there's this bit in the book that really stuck with me when you're talking about sort of bus timetables, and you thought it was kind of magic how this bus could turn up on time. It says it's going to turn up on this time, and it does, and this must be magic.
Yeah.
And you said that your grandmother, she didn't really understand the concept of years and time, and these things were sort of alien to her.
Yeah.
So I think it's these things that I find fascinating, is sort of people in the West probably don't quite get the viewpoints of the many people who surround them today. The people who come from Somalia, the people who come from Ethiopia or Kenya or the Middle East and so on, the places that you grew up, the places that you experienced, the people that you knew. And when you went to the Netherlands and you were with all these refugees who had a different perspective on the West than you did.
Yeah.
And again, just one final point I make before I let you respond, but you admit in the book, and obviously this has been a huge part of your kind of political career in the Netherlands, that you sort of lied to get your refugee status, or maybe is that the right way of putting it? I don't know. In the early 90s when you go to the Netherlands. So that's another thing that we've seen a lot recently of asylum seekers who are coming who aren't genuine. Now, I'm not attacking you personally over that or anything. I'm just
you can attack me genuinely. I came out and said I obviously lied, but then I also told the context of why I did that. When I arrived, so I was fleeing an arranged marriage. I wasn't fleeing the war. We ended up going to live in Kenya, and that's where I went to school. And I would say it's also in Kenya where I learned to read in English, and then started reading bits of English literature, bits of American literature, maybe watched a movie or two, danced to Michael Jackson and other crazy American music. That there was no, the Geneva Convention says if you are in fear of persecution of war. So I wasn't worried about being persecuted by some government for my role in it. I didn't have any role. But when I came to the Netherlands, I was assigned legal aid. And the woman who was my lawyer walked me through, hey, if you want to be granted asylum in the Netherlands, you have to meet these conditions. I told her about the forced marriage, and she said, I'm sorry, we can't take all the victims of forced marriages. That's the whole world. So here are the conditions. So I went back to my bungalow. At the time, they had put us in bungalows. And I started to take the outline of the 1951 Refugee Convention and started filling the blanks with a story that I thought would convince the authorities that they should grant me asylum. I changed my last Ayaan Hirsi Magan is how I was registered. When I was registered, I was, I think, the first one who was born in a hospital in my family. And Magan was the honorific name of my grandfather, but the name he was given as a baby was Ali. And I reasoned that if my father came looking for me, the name Ali was just so profuse that he would have to, and I remember the civil servants typing my name in, and then he reduced it to A.H., my initials, A.H. Ali. And then when I looked down, almost everyone was called Ali. And so it was good to disappear in an ocean of Alis. And then so it was my name and then my year of birth. I thought 13 November is my birthday. I don't want to forget that. But I will just say 67 instead of 69. Later on, that presents me with problems in my political life. But that's not what I was thinking at that moment. At the moment, I don't want my father to find me. I don't want this husband that I was married off to find me. And I want to make something of my life here in this country.
But coming back to this issue of kind of how people from your country think in the West, can you give people an idea of, the cultures that they come from, the moral values that they hold, how that might be different from people in the West who haven't experienced those things?
So as a Somali, the most important bit of your identity is your clan. And so I'm Ayaan, who is the daughter of Hirsi, and Hirsi is the son of Ali Magan. He's a Guled Ali Wais. And it goes on, and so then you get a cluster of what is a small unit, but a large family, a sub-clan of maybe you would say a few thousand people. That's your closest, those are your closest relatives. And then there's another circle, the circle just keeps getting bigger and bigger. And it's all cousins of, and you keep remembering these names, and you have your children remember that lineage, because that's your only source of income, protection, identity, everything that in Western nations that is guaranteed by a nation state. In Somalia, it's all within the clan. And people outside of that clan are your mortal enemies. And so we were taught to develop prejudice, presumed hostility toward the other. And so growing up, say, with my grandmother and my mother around, it was all about that clan context, but now a nation state is formed, seized by the Soviet Union, and they imposed all of these rules that were unclan-like on us. And at one point, I remember we used to have to go and get food. Food is the most basic thing. And they had us all line up in the hot sun. We were starving, and it was too hot, and people were fighting, and just a great deal of animosity to the state, but also to one another. And so how do you get your food? You get your food by calling your clan members. And that system worked. This is how it works for Somalis. Some of the relatives would then go abroad to the white man's country, and they would say, oh, I found a job, and they would send money. Remittances is what we call them now. And that money would arrive from abroad, but the money would be sent to members of the family, members of the clan. You send it to your own clan, and so on. So that is how Somalis live and survive all the adversities that is pointed at them. But what that system entails is clarity in roles, especially the role of men and role of women. So as a woman, as a girl, you're going to, at the age of 5, get cleansed, which is the female genital mutilation. And that essentially means that your genitals are sewn so that when you're married off, your husband can be sure that you're a virgin. And once that, and then the choosing of the husband, that's not just some random, oh, I fall in love. That's unacceptable. This person has to be within the clan and fit within the clan and be somebody who is going to give to the clan. So it's these roles, and these girls, men who have daughters, have to be wary that their daughters don't bring dishonor on the family, and don't become wayward and drift away and do things that they're not supposed to do, which is what I did.
So when Somalis and some of these migrants come to Britain, do they magically lose these values and become Western? I mean, that's the kind of view of some politicians.
No. What happens, I think, so again, in the 1970s, already Somali identity was being challenged and diluted. And since the coming of the white man, Somali identity was being diluted and being challenged. But some, like my mother, hold on and cling and draw themselves into that shell, while others really adapt in a way that is, I'll exploit what the outside hostile world brings, I'll exploit it for my clan. So when large numbers of people with that clan mentality, and then there's an added layer, there's that of Islam, which I also talk about in Infidel. But when you have those two things and you come to the West, and they're infidel, they're not Muslims, and they don't have a clan system, but they offer you a welfare system, they offer you housing and money and this and that. The impulse is, how can I take advantage of all of these things for my clan? Where I think Westerners fail is they don't address this clan identity, and they don't help people that they allow to stay in their countries and become citizens to transition from being a clan loyalist to a citizen of a nation state. And now the numbers are so large that I wonder how you're going to do it. You might have to start campaigns like my father's, literacy campaigns, but this will be assimilation campaigns where you're going to have to give people the choice. You either go back home to your clan context, or if you want to stay here, you have to meet the obligations of a citizen. And I haven't had anyone talk about that.
So do you fear, just very briefly, the West is sort of becoming more like Somalia rather than the other way around?
Well, if you look at the demographic changes, yes, because more and more people, like the Somali clans, are coming here and establishing themselves here, and they are being told you can have the welfare state, whatever it offers you, you can have it. You don't have to give anything in return. The Westerners are not having babies themselves. And then there's the Muslim Brotherhood. So there's that other layer, which I was telling you, that complex, which is explicitly telling Muslim immigrants, do not assimilate, do not adopt the values of the West. So we have a cocktail of problems. We have a cocktail of expectations of the immigrant, clan immigrant, the Muslim immigrant versus the white nation state, host society, that are all at crossroads with one another. And the way out of it is to have these honest, open discussions. People are not being asked to give up their clans. But if you come to England, if you come to, we're in Hungary now, if you come to America, this is how we live with one. Here are the rules. I talked a little bit about, please give me 1 second because it's so important to me. The way men behave towards women is now becoming the most manifest problem in Europe. You cannot walk the streets without, I feel safe in Hungary, I feel safe in Jerusalem, I don't feel safe in Paris, Berlin, Amsterdam, London. That is crazy. We're sacrificing girls and women at the altar of what? Because what is it atonement? I mean, I've talked to so many different people who try and give me an explanation of why the host societies are behaving in the ways that they behave.
Thank you so much, Ayaan, for joining us. Appreciate it.
Yeah.